Just realized I probably didn't get a thumbnail for this, so... Hi there, welcome to A Practical History. I'm Shannon, and today we're getting Italian. If you're thinking about going to Italy or could just use a brief refresher of Italy's history, this is the place for you. I'm gonna try to stuff all of Italy's history into a brief 10-minute video, focusing on the history of the most popular sites to visit in Italy. So let's do it, shall we? Most of the sites you're gonna wanna see focus on three major time periods: the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, and the Renaissance. Before we can get into the Roman Republic, we must start with ancient Rome. This time period starts us off in 700 BCE with Romulus and Remus. The legend goes that these two twin sons of Mars, the god of war, were raised by she-wolves and overthrew the existing Etruscan king. Romulus was not too happy about sharing the title of king though, so he murders his brother Remus and names the new city humbly after himself, Rome. 7 very successful kings reigned after Romulus, but all of that came to an end when the last king was expelled from the city, thereby ending the Roman kingdom and beginning the Roman Republic. With the king gone in 509 BCE, Rome changed from a kingdom to a republic. The republic was set up with 2 elected officials who ran the government along with the Senate. Now these consuls were elected every year in order to prevent them from having king-like power like before. The members of the Senate were the only people that had any direct representation in the government, and in order to be a member of the Senate, you had to be born into an aristocratic family. The other 95% of Roman citizens struggled below the poverty line. This is the government structure that inspired many modern democracies today, and you can see Roman influence throughout the United States and other government buildings. Interestingly enough, if we look at the setup of the Roman Republic, we can see some key issues that societies modeled after it still have today. Unfortunately, the idea behind the Roman Republic was never to have an equal society. It was to take power away from the king, and as such, the political setup still greatly favored the rich. While this era of Roman history is often glamorized as one of the greatest times on earth by Enlightenment thinkers, there was still so much human suffering that needs to be considered before labeling it as perfect. However, the Roman Republic did have its strengths. The Republic built up a giant and incredibly impressive army to ensure they were able to keep their freedom as a republic. By 82 BCE, Rome's land stretched from Scotland to the Sahara. While this empire was huge, the Roman Forum was the heart of the Roman Republic. This is where elections, public speeches, trials, social gatherings, business deals, basically anything that went on in Rome happened in the Forum. And this stayed the center of business throughout the Roman Empire as well. During the Republic, a dude named Julius Caesar became a pretty important war hero, and in 59 BCE, he was elected as one of the consuls. He had lots of fun escapades, messed around with Cleopatra for a bit, conquered lots of land, murdered millions of people, and eventually conquered the city of Rome in a coup to become the all-powerful leader of Rome in 45 BCE. And even though Caesar wasn't necessarily a great person, he actually was an incredible ruler and did make a lot of reforms that benefited the poor citizens of Rome. He mostly did this so that he can get the commoners on his side and use them as a political tool, and that made the nobility extremely scared of his power. By 44 BCE, Caesar just decided that he wanted to be elected leader forever, which was reasonably pretty concerning. Senators decided he was becoming too powerful and they really wanted to preserve the integrity of the Republic. Well, some of them probably actually did, while others of them were just terrified of Caesar's desire for power. So they stabbed him a bunch of times in the middle of the Senate building. Caesar's body was subsequently burned on what is now the temple dedicated to him in the Roman Forum. In fact, if you go, you can see right where this happened. While they may have had the best intentions of attempting to preserve their government structure, all they did was murder a leader that was beloved by the people and didn't actually prevent Rome from becoming an empire ruled by an all-powerful emperor. Which brings us to the Roman Empire. After Caesar was murdered, there was a pretty big fight over who was going to rule Rome. Evidently, Augustus, who was basically Caesar's son, took over and became an all-powerful emperor anyway in 31 BCE. Augustus was Rome's first ever emperor, and he was pretty well liked. His reign started the Pax Romana, which was the longest period of peace that was ever seen in the Roman Empire. After him came many more, not always so well liked emperors, like Tiberius, Caligula, Nero, Other than crazy tyrannical rulers, Rome saw some very important technological improvements during this time. Incredibly advanced aqueducts, citywide sewage systems, and of course, the Colosseum. Attending the gladiatorial games at the Colosseum was the favorite activity of many Roman citizens and was one of the only escapes from their likely incredibly difficult lives. The scale of brutality in the games was staggering. Thousands of humans and animals imported from all over the Roman Empire could be slaughtered at any time, all just to show the world how powerful the Roman Empire truly was. Now, despite being so brutal, the Roman Empire was actually largely religiously tolerant. As a civilization with many gods, it was really easy for Romans to adopt a few more. Every time the Roman Empire conquered a new city or a new area, they would use a prayer of evocation to ask the gods from that town to come back to Rome with them. Jewish people were actually allowed to practice their religion freely as long as they continued to pay taxes to the emperor. Unfortunately, and as always, this did not mean that they were openly accepted into society. The fact that their religion was so different, being monotheistic, than everyone else's, mean that they did have to face adversity, and this is unfortunately true for most of history. The Roman Empire's religious tolerance also does not mean that they were peaceful by any means. They were still conquering cities and capturing their people, likely turning them into slaves. But as long as their people agreed to make sacrifices to the emperor, everything was chill. However, this means that the Roman Empire did take issue when Christianity started gaining popularity in Rome. As many of you know, Christianity is also a monotheistic religion, meaning they only believe in one true God, according to them. Christians were persecuted by the Roman Empire because they refused to acknowledge or respect anyone else's gods. On top of that, they had a pretty intense conversion campaign, meaning that they were actively trying to get other Romans to not respect the emperor as a god. Their religion posed a threat to the sanctity of the empire, and many emperors were not okay with that. The emperors of Rome became convinced that the only way to keep the empire together was to stamp out all Christians. But Christian martyrdom only gained them more respect and followers. Side note, around this time, the empire was also getting too big to govern all at once, so Rome split itself into East and West empires. Then along came Constantine. He converted himself to Christianity after seeing a flaming cross appear to him in a vision that caused him to win a large battle. He believed he could use Christianity to help unite the empire. So in 326 AD, Emperor Constantine ruled that Christians were able and encouraged to practice Christianity. The Roman Empire's conversion to Christianity enabled the church to gain unprecedented amounts of power that's seen throughout centuries even after the fall of Rome. Rome was constantly undergoing battle after battle, and after a while it really started to take toll on the empire. Constantine established that the capital of Eastern Rome would be where the largest battles were currently going on, the city that he so humbly named after himself, Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Now, around 100 years and lots of attacks from barbarians later, Rome became weaker and weaker. The city of Rome was sacked, central power of Rome was essentially non-existent and just taxed people. This was the beginning of the fall of Rome. Now, the fall of Rome gives us the beginnings of the Middle Ages. Now, Middle Ages or medieval Europe are literally defined as the time between the Roman Empire and the Renaissance. Italy's history pretty much called the shots on when the Western Empire was in a new era. So this was widely regarded as a pretty crap period of time in history because it wasn't the Empire or the Renaissance. It was marked by the plague, the Little Ice Age, 100 Years' War, the Crusades, famine, disease, and all just generally really bad things or bad ideas. After the fall of the Roman Empire, there wasn't one uniting political power, just lots of kings with lots of little kingdoms. The kings would grant land called fiefs to noblemen and bishops, and then serfs would work on the land. As agricultural technology improved, though, less farmers were needed and more people moved to the city. And this caused people to get married later on in life and the birth rate to decrease, so overall in the time of the Middle Ages, population didn't increase as much as people thought it would, which is another reason why people thought it was a bad period of time. Kings and queens, though, weren't actually the most powerful political entity at that time. Many royals boosted their power from alliances with the church. The Catholic Church became the most powerful institution of the time period in Western Europe, growing at an enormous rate and garnering the respect of the Western European empires. This time period isn't widely discussed in tourism in Italy. It's largely overshadowed by its successor, the Renaissance. Historians have recently started to revisit the significance of this time period, though. For the purpose of Italy, they're probably not going to talk about it as much, but in other countries, you'll hear much more about it. After we muscle through 1,000 or so years of meh, we make it to the Renaissance, which quite literally translates to the rebirth. The basic idea behind the Renaissance is that historians during that time period decided that the first 2 centuries of the Roman Empire were the peak development of human civilization, according to Petrarch. They began to define this period of time as the classics, never to be surpassed, art, society, politics, and all the centuries to follow. It was the best thing you could have done. That's how shitty the Middle Ages were perceived. They preached that the only way to possibly progress as a society was to then go back to that very successful period of time, because clearly whatever they've been doing before wasn't working according to them. All of Italy was run by a few oligarchies, which were wealthy merchant families mostly, like the Medici and the Albizzi. The way that these wealthy families elevated their status and power was to promote their image, and they did that by commissioning large works of art. Making art became a form of civic pride. Instead of like who had the best weapons during the medieval time periods, it was which city could make the best sculptures and art pieces. This, combined with the recent decision that the classics were the best, inspired an incredible revolution in arts, education, and overall society. Place to be? Florence, Italy. That's where all of the art is happening. Any artist you know that's also a Ninja Turtle came about during this time period. Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, all big names of this time. Incredible artists and scientists, for some, who were paid to make their art by mostly wealthy old dudes. Sometimes they loved creating their pieces, the David. Other times it was torturous, Sistine Chapel. The Pieta, the Duomo, and countless other pieces of work were all popularized through the Renaissance. If you go to Italy, you will undoubtedly hear a lot of mention of the artists and achievements from this time period. And honestly, this became the most significant time period due to historians mostly idolizing it. Not that the Renaissance isn't worthy of a lot of praise, but the amount that it overshadows its predecessor is mostly due to historians idolizing the creativity in this period of time. Now, from the Renaissance to the present, from the 1600s to 2020, Italy's gone through a lot of changes. You might not get to see a lot of this history on most of the tourist sites. They might not cover it, anything past the Renaissance, but it's important that you understand at least a limited amount of what was going on from then till now. So for a long time, Italy remained a few different civilizations that all liked to fight with each other over who was the best and who had the most money. It became a whole kingdom for a hot second. Then, in World War I came along and Italy decided that it would be a good idea to link up with Allied powers and fight in the Great War, mostly because they were promised some land that they wanted if they did win. So Italy ended up on the winning side of the war, but the citizens of Italy were pretty pissed about losing their lives, money, and time fighting a war they didn't need to be in. So upset that there were riots and uprisings. And then fascism was like, hey, I know what can fix this. Fascism. It could not. So they, over time, took over the country, and Mussolini said, I'm the only one that can make this better. He was not. Mussolini defined better as dismantling democracy and becoming an all-powerful dictator. Turns out there was another all-powerful fascist dictator at the time, so Mussolini decided to link up with Germany. Then most Italians were like, hey, remember that going to war was the reason that we were upset in the first place? Remember? And Mussolini said, shut up, and proceeded to be racist and lose World War II with Hitler. After this, there was a large anti-fascist campaign in Italy, and a democratic Republican government was set up. So since then, communists, socialists, Christian Democrats all continued to fight over who could have the most governmental power in Italy. Well, that's it. A practical history of Italy in around 10 minutes. I glossed over a lot, so if there's anything that you want to learn more about that I kind of just slid right through, please let me know in the comments. My current plan is to make a video of each of the major cities in Italy to get you to know the history of those places specifically, and go over the sites that you'd probably see there. Let me know what you think about that, I guess. All of the sources that I use are listed in the description below, and I'll see you next time.